On July 23rd, 2024, a large explosion rocked Yellowstone National Park near Biscuit Basin, and this explosion sent visitors running, and it sent debris into the air, steam and water and boiling hot water flown into the air, and it just scattered debris everywhere, moved rocks, even giant boulders, and destroyed boardwalks at Yellowstone National Park. Now, what exactly caused this giant explosion? This explosion is all over the news, and there's lots of videos of it being posted online. But what exactly caused this hydrothermal explosion? And is this even supposed to happen? And is this a sign that Yellowstone is erupting? Well, it's not a sign that the volcano is erupting, but it's a sign that a lot of activity is going on under Yellowstone. And it's all thanks to hydrothermal activity and hydrothermal systems under this national park. How do all of these work, and what's the science behind it? In this episode, I'm going to take you behind the science of this Yellowstone explosion and break it down bit by bit on how this entire explosion and this entire system happens. Let's get right into it. Let's go. Now, before we look at what exactly caused this explosion, the science behind that, let's look at Yellowstone National Park. It was created in 1872, and it was considered a national park then. Now, what's so special about Yellowstone? Well, it sits on a large bed of volcanic activity, and it's basically a hotspot for all these hydrothermal and even volcanic activity. That's why there's so many geysers, so many hot springs at Yellowstone. It's one of the biggest tourist spots and one of the biggest national parks that a lot of people flock to because it has all these unique geysers and hot springs that are just really cool to witness. And it's in parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho in the US. And it's one of the first national parks, and it is so popular with tourists because it has a wide variety of wildlife, a wide variety of natural features, and so much more. Now, when you're looking at news headlines and videos and articles about this Yellowstone explosion, you'll see that it's called the Yellowstone Hydrothermal Explosion in 2024. Now, what does hydrothermal even mean? Well, hydro means water and thermal means heat and energy. So if you put those together, it basically tells you what hydrothermal means. It's water and heat interacting. You see, underground, there's a lot of heat because of magma and hot rocks and even the mantle of the earth, which are the layers of the earth. It's very hot. And what happens when water and natural reservoirs of water are down there? Well, what happens is that it gets heated up. And when this heats up, the water starts moving, it has steam, it starts building up pressure underground, and it gets spewed out of the earth. And that's what geysers and hot springs and even hydrothermal vents that are under the ocean. That's how all of these happen. It's when the water gets heated up and it starts moving underwater, it creates channels in the ground, and it spews up in many different places. And Yellowstone is a very big hotspot of hydrothermal energy and hydrothermal action, and that's all because of all the magma under the dormant volcano and this volcanic hotspot of Yellowstone National Park because of all that heat. And there's so much water underneath too, the groundwater and reservoirs and even the rivers and lakes. Those all feed this hydrothermal system. And all this water is very, very hot. It's boiling, and that's how these hot springs and geysers, such as the Old Faithful geyser at Yellowstone National Park. That's how these all happen, is because all that water is getting spewed out because of how hot that water is, and it just gets pushed up by all of that pressure underground. Now, let's get into what exactly caused this Biscuit Basin explosion. Now, what exactly happened at Black Diamond Pool in Biscuit Basin at Yellowstone National Park? Well, there is an entire hydrothermal system, as we talked about earlier, under this entire national park and under this area. Now, what happened was, it's not related to any volcanic or any seismic or earthquake activity. This is all natural, and even scientists at Yellowstone are saying that this is actually smaller than some of the explosions and some of the bursts that they've seen in the past. But this is still a very significant one, and it's completely natural to happen. Luckily, no one was injured during this explosion, and everyone was able to make it out of the area safely. So that is very good news. But what exactly caused this? Well, it was actually a very shallow hydrothermal system. And as far as we know, and as far as the U.S. Geological Survey and the Yellowstone National Park know, this was caused by a lot of pressure building up under the Black Diamond Pool. So what happens? So this is a very shallow system. So just underground, all of this water was there, and as it started heating up and it started flashing into steam. Remember, steam is also water vapor. Now, what happens when a gas starts taking up space? It takes up a lot of space, and as that happens, it starts expanding, and eventually, since the water is flashing into steam and it's turning into steam very, very quickly, it just can't hold it anymore. The ground under can't hold it anymore. It just explodes outwards. And that's how this entire explosion happened. It's because of all that steam that was building up underground. This happened all of a sudden because this water, when it flashes into steam, it's a very, very quick transition. And as that happens, there's an increase in pressure underground and it just bursts. And that's how this entire explosion happened. That's why it spewed so much dirt, so much mud, so many rocks, grapefruit-sized rocks, and hundreds of feet in the air and wide. And this really reshaped the pools, and the aftermath of this is very, very interesting because it just spewed all of that rock and everything. It moved boulders as well, and boardwalks that people walk on to view these areas are all destroyed, and there is so much debris everywhere. There's so many rocks, so much mud, and the explosion videos are actually released by tourists and even the U.S. Geographical Survey, USGS, and those videos are so cool to watch because you can see all of that steam, all of that dirt, all of that black rock and mud getting burst up into the air along with the boiling water, because as we talked about, all that steam and boiling water are what causes explosion in the first place, and that's why the aftermath is so large. Luckily, people were able to get out of this safely, so there were no injuries reported. But it is just so cool to see how the Earth is changing, and you can see it at Yellowstone. And this just giant explosion caught people off guard as well, because there's not really a way you can predict all these different pressure buildups because they happen so quickly. Sometimes they can accumulate over time, but in this case, it flashed into steam, causing the giant explosion. It's just so cool to see all of this hydrothermal activity happening right now. This is a very recent event, so scientists are still looking into what exactly caused it and to predict more in the future. It is so cool to see all this science happening under us right now. Alright, let's recap on what we learned in this episode. We learned that this entire Yellowstone explosion was caused by buildup in pressure from water flashing into steam. This is all due to hydrothermal systems under this park. Hydrothermal systems are the relationship between water and heat. And when there is so much heat coming out of the earth, for example, due to magma, hot rocks, and the earth's mantle, all this water gets heated up and it starts moving around, creating different pathways underground, and eventually bursting out of the earth. Like what happened at this explosion was a very, very fast burst, but what happens every day are like hydrothermal events that are in the ocean, geysers at Yellowstone like the Old Faithful, and so much more, such as hot springs and everything, and this is all caused by hydrothermal activity. Luckily, no one was injured during this explosion Tuesday, and this explosion caused lots of changes in all of the land surrounding Yellowstone, killed a few trees, and destroyed the boardwalks, but luckily no one was hurt. This explosion is truly interesting to look at, and scientists are still looking at new ways to start predicting these, and new ways to look at what exactly happened, and learning more about what happened at Yellowstone. This is an ongoing science story, so it's so amazing to keep up with it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Spectacular Science. Spectacular Science, produced and hosted by me, Akshay Raman. Our theme song and additional music are by Chan Ramachandran. Please visit my podcast website, spectacularsci.com, to find interactive activities, articles, and blog posts. That's spectacularsci.com. Do you have a science question you want answered on a Spectacular Science episode and get a special shout out? Or grab an adult and head over to spectacularsci.com/contact. There you can find a contact form. You can send me your amazing science questions. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast where you're listening right now. It really encourages me, and you'll be up to date on all the new episodes. So subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family. Thank you so much. This gets me one step closer to my goal of 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of 2024. Let's see if we can make this happen, and let's get closer to this goal. So don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Spectacular Science next week. Keep thinking about science.